Good evening, algebra students. This is section 4.6, where we are working on our functions and relations of our functions. And I just wanted to give you a few hints for tonight's homework, where we're talking about a mapping diagram. Basically, X is our domain and Y is our range. And we can use mapping diagrams to tell us if a given relation is a function. So what we do is we put domain on the left and we put range on the right. Remember, domain is X and range is Y. And for number 8 on your homework, it gave you a list of ordered pairs. And you would list the domain or the X values. And in this case, every X value on those ordered pairs was 3. So notice how I only list it once, okay? If there's a repeat value when you're doing a mapping diagram, whether it's an X or a Y, you only list it once. So I listed the 3 for the X, and then I listed all the Y values that those ordered pairs gave me, and I list them in ascending order. So I list -2, 4, 7, and 8. Then I draw a line to represent the relation between the X value and its Y value. So the first ordered pair was like 3, -2, then I have 3, 4, 3, 7, and 3, 8. So once my mapping diagram is drawn, I can look at it and determine whether or not it is or is not a function. This is clearly not a function because X cannot have more than one Y, right? If I had a function machine drawn here and I threw in a 3 for the input and it chugged through a rule, there's no way it could throw out a -2 the first time, a 4 another time, a 7 another time, and an 8 another time. If I have a given input for a function, it has to give me the same output every time. So that is not a function. Okay? So mapping diagrams, we can draw them, and we can help us determine whether or not a given set of data is or is not a function. All right? Number 12. Let's look at the vertical line test. So the vertical line test tells us how it helps us determine whether something's a function if we're given a graph. Now this particular graph was just dots, okay? It didn't have the red line on it. This is number 12 on your homework. It was just these random dots. And we're supposed to determine whether this is or is not a function. Well, when I look at this, I know that if I put in an X and I get out a Y, and it's the same Y every time, then it's a function. So how we use the vertical line test is we draw an X value, which is a vertical line on our graph, and if it hits the solution in more than one place, that means that a given X value going an input into that function machine spit out 2 different Y's as solutions. So take a look. I drew X equals -1 here on the graph it gave you for number 12. And where X equals -1, I got Y equals -1 and Y equals 1. Well, that can't possibly be a function, right? Because the same input can't get 2 different outputs. So that vertical line test tells me this is not a function. All right, number 18 asks you to find the range for a given domain. So there's our function rule, f of x equals 2x minus 7. It gives you a domain, which basically is just giving you the x values. So it's telling you x is -2, -1, 0, 1, 2. That should look very familiar to you because those are the values we use when we make charts. So what are we going to do here is just plug and chug. So we're going to plug in -2 for x, -1 for x, and so on. And we're going to calculate our y. We're going to get -11, -9, -7, -5, and -3. And the problem wants us to then identify the range. So we would write those y answers, those range results, as a set. Just like they give us our domain as a set, we're going to write our range as a set. So we're going to use those squiggly parentheses and write -11, -9, -7, -5, -3, and there is our range for a given domain and a given function. Okay? Last one. I'm not going to give you the answers on this one because you need to think through it, but I will give you a little hint. So for number 22, it says to find a reasonable domain and range. Okay, and it gives you a problem, a story problem. The first thing you need to do for number 22 is you need to identify which is X, which is the independent variable, and which is Y, the dependent variable. And remember, ask yourself, what depends on what? Okay? Once you have that, then use the story problem to help you determine what are reasonable values for each of those variables. So what's reasonable for, say, the number of gallons of gas or the number of miles you can travel or things like that, right? So determine what's reasonable for that. Can I have 100 gallons of gas in my car? Can I go 100,000 miles in my car on a gallon of gas? So think about that. Again, make these make sense. It really helps you to retain the material. In addition to this video, I am posting and emailing a updated version of the Chapter 4 notes sheet that has these last couple sections in it so that you can take a look and see a little bit more detail on our vertical line test and on our mapping diagrams. So use that as a resource as well for your homework tonight. All right, see you tomorrow.